So I was doing some reading the other day in my Bible. There's a Bible app that I use, which I'll actually try to link into the video just because I found it to be really helpful. I really enjoy reading from a hard copy Bible, but just having it in my pocket all the time has been really helpful, really beneficial. So I'll try to get that linked in there, assuming I can figure out how to do that. But it provides you with a verse of the day. And so a lot of times I'll read the verse of the day, but then I'll back up and try to actually read maybe that chapter, whatever it came out of, just to get some context. So I backed up and I'm reading through that, and I was actually walking on the treadmill, just kind of reading through it. And I've been writing each week a lot of sermon outlines, which I've taken and just kind of put into a blog because I really appreciated what God was lining up for me there and letting me do. And so I wanted to put that in a way where I could try to share it with people, just because I feel like I'm really being blessed and really being given something out of all that. So I've been doing that, and I'll link that in as well. But so I'm reading through Matthew 4, and I couldn't just read it normally. I started basically doing what I would have done if I were writing an outline for it. I started trying to dive deeper into the text, and it keeps coming back to me that I feel like I should be sharing what I'm being given, because I am being given this. This isn't just me, that I'm special and I'm looking and all I can see in the text, and I can the Spirit is doing something for me here, and it just seemed like I should be sharing it. So it made me want to maybe try recording something in video format to put out there just to share with people, because sometimes that's easier than sitting down and maybe reading a whole outline, and sometimes sitting down and watching a video isn't easy either. But just to try to offer it up in different media forms. So typically what I've done is I do a sermon outline on whatever my preacher is going to be preaching that coming Sunday. He preaches on it, then I release the outline in conjunction with a link to his sermon. So this is the first thing that I've done that's not tied into something that someone else is preaching on, but this is this is what I started taking away through Matthew 4. So I'm going to read Matthew 4, verses 1 through 11, and then I'll jump back and kind of give the breakdown of what I'm taking away from this a little more in depth. So Matthew 4 starts out it's after the baptism of Jesus, and it's going into the temptation of Jesus. So it says, "Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread.' But he answered, 'It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.' Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone.' Jesus said to him, 'Again it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test.' Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, 'All these I will give to you. All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me.' Then Jesus said to him, 'Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.' Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him." So there's the story element of it, obviously, just reading through what happened and learning from the story, which is great and relevant. I mean, that's a big part of just what the text is familiarizing us with the story and history there. But so when I started to break it down a little bit, in the very beginning, Jesus is baptized in Matthew 3. And we go into this, that Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So he didn't just have a whim. He didn't just decide he wanted to go. He's led by the Spirit. So what does that tell me? What is the relevance there? For spiritual maturity to develop, there have to be trials of some kind. Like, the world is fallen. So there's sin nature within man. There's evil within the world itself. our faith is not going to be untested. Our relationship with God, our pursuit of God, none of that's going to be untested. So this is being shown by Jesus, is being exemplified by Jesus, giving us an example here. So the Spirit leads him into the wilderness to be tempted, for this trial to take place, for this testing of faith to take place. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry, and the tempter came to him. I kind of stopped right there, and this is something I've had some discussions about with friends. It doesn't say that for the duration of that 40 days and 40 nights, he wasn't being tempted. Based on just the context here, I would assume that he's being tempted the entire time he's there in the desert. But what it chooses to show us there, to show us here, is that it's after fasting 40 days and 40 nights he was hungry. So Jesus is fully God and he's fully man. He has the Spirit, he has the might, he has the wherewithal, he has the wisdom of God, but he has the flesh of man. So that what I started thinking about here is the more physically compromised we become, the more inclined we are to give into sin. The more inclined we are, I would say, to give into just maybe not good decisions, whether you want to call them directly sinful or not. I always think about if someone's trying to start a new diet, that first meal usually isn't the problem. It's when you're really getting into that caloric deficit. It's when you're really getting hungry that suddenly it's so much easier to just say, you know what, forget it, and just grab something that's quick and easy. It's always easy, when you're sleep deprived, when you're tired, it just starts to become so much easier to make bad decisions. So he's been fasting 40 days and 40 nights. Now, it also doesn't tell us there's different context for fasting. There's literally nothing. You get nothing. There's also, limited dietary fasting, where it's just, very, very small amounts of calories, very limited foods. But regardless, he is in a physically depleted state at this point. So it's in that sort of mindset that we get the example of Satan coming to him and saying, hey, and we sort of get a double whammy here. One, he's hungry, but also there's the pride element that Satan tries to spin into it. So Satan comes and says, if you're the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. So it's partly, hey, if you're the Son of God, why don't you go ahead and flex? Why don't you go ahead and show me? Why don't you go ahead and show you if you really are who you say you are? Go ahead and do it. But I started thinking about it, and one of the things that came to me, because I'm thinking, is there anything directly sinful about turning stones into bread? And I almost wanted to say no. It kind of seems like not. It doesn't seem like it would be a huge deal. But one thing I thought about is, if there is anything ever in your life that is obvious, that it's something that Satan wants you to do, you need to not do it. And it's not a prideful thing, human to human, where I'm not going to do what you told me to do just out of spite. You have to remember who we're dealing with here. It would be like me telling you, I hate you. I want you to die. I want your world to be an absolute ruin. I want you to rot and burn for all of eternity. And I want you to suffer as much as you possibly can. I hate you just down to the marrow of your bones. And everything that I do to and for you is going to be aimed at your destruction. And then I say, hey, will you pick that up and hand me that over there? You probably shouldn't do it. I just showed you all of my cards and I hate you. So that's Satan. There's no good there. There's no then maybe this. No, if it is his desire for you to do anything, even if it doesn't seem on the surface like a terrible idea, take a second or third look, because it's a terrible idea. It's not a good idea at all if it's something that he is trying to get you to do. The next thing I thought of is, even that aside, if you look biblically at the miracles that Jesus performs, he does them to other people. He does them for other people. Even something like the walking on water that he is directly doing, he does in the sight of others that ultimately serves to affirm the faith, build up the faith, provide his testimony. There is a ministry-based reason for everything that he does. If he just turns bread and stones here in the desert by himself, that doesn't serve the ministry, it just serves him. And he is being sustained by God. It's not about sort of a cop-out of, working a miracle solely to his own benefit just to have some bread. He counters back, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Now, something that I have started doing is, anytime I run across something where it says it is written, sometimes my Bible will have a little marker next to it where I can tap on it and it'll actually bring up what part of the Bible that comes from. But something I've started doing a lot is this is one of the brilliant things about the internet, I'll just look it up. So I'm searching here, it is written, man shall not live by bread, and it auto-completes for me, and it directs me to Deuteronomy 8:3. So I'm going to jump over to Deuteronomy 8:3 and see what that says. And doing that has been awesome because it lets me put all these pieces together. Because sometimes I'm reading something and I know, hey, I think it says that in this book, or I think it says that in this book. I've gotten really into reading my Bible over the last handful of months, way more than I ever have before, and it starts to really come together, but I still don't know where every little thing is. So Deuteronomy 8:3, this is obviously post-Exodus, so you're dealing with the Israelites in the wilderness at this point. 8:3 says, and he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Sorry if that was a little clunky, but that was the whole thing. If you don't know the history there with the Israelites and the manna, they're in the wilderness, there's no food. And the Israelites, to put it kindly, were a grumbly bunch. I say that not overly judgmental because we're not really any better in most respects today, but every day they would wake and there was manna on the ground, which could be taken and worked into bread and used to make food. God literally provided the food directly to and for them to sustain them. But the interesting thing was it was good for a day. If you took it and put it in jars or tried to save more than what you actually needed, it would rot immediately. It would grow worms. It would become just disgusting, except for the manna that you saved going into the Sabbath, because no manna would be put out. You were not to collect manna on the Sabbath. It's a day of holy rest. So the day prior to the Sabbath, you would get a double portion. That would carry you through the Sabbath, so you would have something to eat. But so it's reminding that it's not about the flesh. Here is Satan trying to tempt Jesus with food, and he's countering back this sort of juxtaposition that it's not about the flesh, it's about the spirit. It's about the faith in God. It's about God sustaining me, not just what I can do for myself in this moment. So he knocks back that temptation. Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up lest you strike your foot against a stone. Now this one threw me a little bit because it's not Jesus saying, it's not one of the apostles saying, it is written, and using it as a supporting statement. This is Satan saying, it is written. So I had already looked this one up, and if I'm remembering correctly, what he's referencing is the 91st Psalm. 99% sure. Here we go. Yep. Okay. I remembered right. 91st Psalm. Verse 11. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Something that I've started doing, which I would encourage anybody to do. There are a lot of good Bible verses that just stand alone as Bible verses. Something like John 3:16, which gets quoted a ton. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever should believe in him shall not perish but have eternal life. You can tweak that a little bit based on the translation you're reading, but the sentiment is that. That verse stands on its own. That's beautiful, but there are a lot of them that it helps if you back up a little bit. Read a few verses ahead, read it in the chapter, and get the context for what it's trying to say exactly. So here, Satan's quoting a psalm. He's quoting David, for he will command his angels concerning you. Go for it, man. If you're, once again, that pride trip, if you're really the Son of God, throw yourself down. God's not going to let anything happen to you. Flex that. Work this miracle really to your own justification and benefit. But if you back up, verses 9 and 10 of Psalm 91 say, because you have made the Lord your dwelling place, the Most High who is my refuge, no evil shall be allowed to befall you, no plague come near your tent. Then it goes into, for he will command his angels concerning you. The protection of God is in submission to God. It isn't something where you just go off and do whatever the heck you want to do, and you take for granted and you abuse the mercy and love and protection of the divine. It's in submission to him that there is any protection to begin with. So, jumping back to Matthew 4, Satan quotes David, and Jesus said to him, again it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. He shuts him up with a sentence on that one. It's that simple. Now that, I'm going to look up where that's from. I do remember that is wilderness era Israelites, but let's see where it's at exactly. Deuteronomy 6:16. Going right back to Deuteronomy. 6:16 says, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test as you tested him at Massah. You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God and his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you. Now, normally, personally, I would take a deep dive. I would search exactly what it was that they did at Massah, Massah. But I don't want to make this too long and diverting everything off of Matthew. And what I'm doing here is not anything revolutionary or complex. By all means, I would encourage you, first and foremost, read your Bible. I was told to do that for years and years and years and years, and I just cherry picked. I never really dove in, and I'm telling you, I was missing out. Read your Bible. But when you encounter something that's like, that's weird, the whole thing makes sense. The entire Bible is cohesive. It doesn't contradict itself. It all fits together like this amazingly beautiful, intricate puzzle. So, if you run across something that's like, I wonder where they referenced that, I want to look it up. I could guess based off of context, because of what the Israelites did over and over and over and over again in the wilderness. It was constantly God protecting them, providing provision for them, and it was constantly whining and grumbling. The verbiage is that they grumbled a lot. It was always, why'd you take us out of Egypt? Just to kill us in the wilderness? There was always this notion of better to have just been slaves in Egypt than to have, left, be in the wilderness and be suffering the trials of the wilderness, but where God is providing for you. The big example that always comes to mind for me is Korah's rebellion. I think it's Korah, if you want to look that up, but that takes place in Exodus. It's to the extent where they're so grumbly, they're so fed up, they're ready to kill Moses, Aaron, the priests, and just name new leaders and just head everybody back to Egypt. And God literally opens the ground and just swallows these leaders of the rebellion and their family. So there were multiple times that the Israelites just put God to the test, just through sheer lack of faith and conviction that they knew better. Which, once again, I sometimes I'm reading the Old Testament and I'll start to come down kind of hard on the Israelites, and it's like, we're not better. We're falling into all of the same pitfalls today, just like we always have. So to come back to Matthew, verse 8 is where we're going to pick up. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, be gone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. I didn't take this away when I read it the first time, but something that one of my friends pointed out to me that I thought was a very poignant takeaway. It doesn't say here that Satan doesn't have the authority to give him the kingdom, the kingdoms of the world. Like, that's something that's really easy to forget, because God's power is so obvious and his ability to work in our lives is so prevalent. God has dominion over everything, but the world is fallen. This world is sin stained. So I've been reading a lot in 2 Peter, and that's something that you kind of dive into when you start thinking about the second coming and the tribulation and everything that takes place in Revelation and the end of this world and the beginning of the new heaven and the new earth. Like, that's an element of this world going away, as this world is sin stained and tainted, in the sense that it's all going to eventually get destroyed. This Satan has a kingdom here. And it can sound a little wonky sometimes when you say that. I remember hearing that before, and people get a little. Any Christian should be an evangelical Christian. We should all be sharing. But sometimes there's a connotation with an evangelical that they think about the really aggressive, kind of take the Bible and shove it down your throat. No arguments, no conversations, no nothing, no clarification. Just they're going to waterboard you with Scripture. And I've heard them say, like, this whole place is just Satan's playground, and it gets a little, I don't want to say comical, but it sounds excessive. But if you back up a little bit and you think about the fact that Satan gets referred to in certain parts of the Bible as like the spirit of the air. Spoiler alert, we have that everywhere. Like, there is a degree of dominion and power and influence that he has through the sin nature of man that is prevalent in our societies as a whole. Like, there is no sinless society on the face of the earth. There's just not. So you kind of think about it and put it in context, and that was pointed out to me, and it's like, Jesus doesn't say, get out of here, you couldn't do that to begin with. Which, that isn't the important part, but it is relevant to note. That's a little unsettling, but true. What does he say? Jesus says, be gone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. That's not the only time that Jesus references that. There's a point where the Pharisees are trying to sort of trap him into which commandment is the greatest. We're going to get him to pick a side. We're going to trap him. There's so many examples throughout the Gospels of the Pharisees trying to sort of get Jesus into a corner, and Jesus just mic drops on him. Like, he just doesn't play that. Everything he spouts out is perfect. Everything he says is truth and wisdom, because he's God. So this is where he references this, in this particular instance. All of the other commandments, all of the incredibly extensive laws, if you go through Leviticus and read through all of the laws that by the time Jesus came, the Pharisees had taken and added to and made it to where it's just law for the sake of law. It's just, it's action for the sake of action. There's not faith behind it. It's rules to run you into the ground. All of it was only ever aimed at obedience and servitude to God. So once again, he takes it, he turns it back around, and he points us not to flesh, not to the world, not to what the body feels like it needs, but to the spirit, which is ultimately, not that the body is completely irrelevant, we are made of flesh, that has to be tended to in some regard, but it is ultimately the spirit that is the most important, that is what is to be fed above all else in that regard. And then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. I find that very interesting, but I don't really know how to dig into that last part, other than Satan finally gives up and just leaves. But angels coming and were ministering to him. The idea of Jesus interacting with angels, we're given some examples if you read through the Gospels, and you read about the Transfiguration, these instances where you see Jesus transform. You get to see, and I love it, there are little moments throughout the Gospels where Jesus will say things that point back to his godship, like that he's a man, but it's not just a man, because sometimes it's easy to forget because he was in human form. But anytime it acknowledges, I always try to make a really big deal out of when I note that, because like in this instance, we have him sort of recovering from this trial in the wilderness, and what happens, angels come and are ministering to him. And it's beyond us as humans to understand what exactly that might entail, but it's no less fascinating. So those are my thoughts, kind of where the Spirit has guided me and what I felt opened up to in Matthew 4. I really love doing this. I love getting to dive into the Word and do things like this with it. So I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you took something out of it. And